design school. It was the late 90s, and if you drew a sports car, the shape looked a lot like a Ferrari.
This is the Ferrari 355, and personally, this is one of my favorite designs. I was never a fan of the 348. I like the 308, but only in the GTO. Ferrari, for me, styling-wise, went through a lot of dry years, including the 360, but right there in the middle is this one, the 355 with the hardtop. You can see a lot of them convertible. The hardtop is by far the better way to go.
I was not sure if we would ever be able to drive one of these cars, and fortunately, this is one of the nicest ones I've ever seen. And yes, it's in resale red, but who cares? It's in Ferrari red with the camel, beautiful Connolly leather interior.
A quick glance at this interior is classic Ferrari. These seats have got the horizontal bars on them. It is the combination black and camel color. It is very Ferrari in here. These gauges, it's the Ferrari font. I mean, it's instant nostalgia to all the things that Ferrari is. However, it is also a classic Ferrari in many ways. Of course, there's no navigation of any kind. The stereo in here clearly isn't the one that came with the car, but it's still just a basic stereo. This center console is a little weird because you can see that with this panel, they would have had a gated shifter available here, and on this one, of course, it only has this little slide here to get it into reverse. You have to lift up on the T transmission piece and slide it back and wait for the click for it to go into reverse.
Putting this car into gear, you can hear the hydraulic actuators back there when you actually shift gears.
So this is a paddle shift gearbox from the 1990s. That's kind of like your cell phone from the 1990s. Technology has moved on by leaps and bounds since then.
It's not instant and super responsive like we know transmissions can be, but who cares? That's the thing about driving a 355. Because as of 1998, they dropped the F in front of the 355 when they introduced the F1 transmission.
The F1 gearbox is horribly dated. It reminds me quite a bit, actually, of BMW's first automated gearbox, the SMG, which was also a single clutch. That single clutch manual on the BMW requires the same thing as this first-gen Ferrari F1 gearbox, and that is you have to think of it more like a manual that has automation through paddles. You have to lift your foot off the gas for the upshifts as if you were doing a shift, as if you were hitting a clutch pedal. You've got to give it a chance to move. Plus, the interesting thing is this car still has a cable throttle. With the 360, they get rid of the cable throttle, but here they still have one.
Let up. Full throttle.
Good old Ferrari V8, which means it revs really high and it's tiny. Now that 3.5 in 355 means a 3.5 liter V8.
3.5 liters of 375 Italian horsepower. Well, yeah, what makes it Italian? It's the care and feeding. And if you haven't noticed by now, take a look at the license plate. Yes, this owner has had the engine out for its service, and it's designed to be that way.
They actually broke with the nomenclature for this car. Prior to this car, think of the 308, for example. That was a 3-liter, 8-cylinder, 308. The 348 was a 3.4-liter, 8-cylinder, 348. This was a break because they were super excited about the fact we have 5 valves on this head. So as a result, this is the 3.5 for 3.5, but they threw out the 8 and just wanted you to know there's another 5 in there. 5 valves.
F1 is really the only race series where trickle-down technology makes its way into the road cars, and Ferrari is the king of that. I mean, they kind of pioneered that, I feel like, and they've been doing it ever since for their special road cars.
This is a great, unique driving experience. Look at how much movement my hands require. This is a slow steering rack and a big wheel. This takes real effort to stay ahead of it.
The beauty of this steering rack is that it's progressive from lock to lock. There isn't a dead spot. There is nothing changing about the steering feel. It's heavy, it's solid, it's weighty, and it gives me feedback. I can feel what the tires are doing.
But even with the F1 gearbox, there's no falling asleep in this car. There's work required to get something out of it. And to take it quickly on a road this tight is requiring quite a bit of, oh my gosh, okay, that's a hand over hand for a hairpin.
Who cares? Who cares about going fast, right? Who cares about times, lap times, 0 to 60, any of that? This is a car to just enjoy what it is when it was built. You have to drive it with the mindset of driving it in 1998 when it came out. That's where your head has to be, and you have to ignore every other car. Despite anybody who knows what a GTR can do, it'll bury this thing. But it's a Ferrari, and everybody who sees the Ferrari thinks, the Ferrari will take anything, right? It's a Ferrari.
Ferrari really doesn't want to sell you cars. They want to sell you exclusivity. So what they want you to do is buy an older Ferrari as your first Ferrari. This is honestly my favorite choice. But if you're just wanting to buy a sports car, you should spend the money on something else, because sports cars have gone way, way beyond this.
You know, you saw these prices come down about 7 or 8 years ago and plateau, and now they're on their way up. This owner has had his car since 19,000 miles, and he's owned it for 3 years.
Channing, that drives this, of course, he commutes in the Bay Area. He actually tries to drive this car a couple days a week. And in that regard, he's probably pretty happy to have this gearbox, but there is something wonderful about, of course, that gated shifter. He also told us he was shopping for the right car that was also close to him. When this one came across, the price was right. Look at it, it's gorgeous. So it was ready to go. It didn't have the right gearbox. He asked himself, do I want one of these cars, or am I just chasing a gated shifter? He decided to go for this car with the F1 gearbox. I could debate that with him. Honestly, I would have liked to have had the manual, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this car feels like a time capsule, is wonderful to drive, and is very Ferrari.
I love this car. It's so beautiful. I'm so thrilled to have driven this thing. I want to drive it more, of course, but this is just a fast blast. We're not comparing it to anything. It is what it is, and that's the beauty of the 355. It stands in time just by itself as a beautiful Ferrari, pretty much the one you want. Yeah, there's more modern, but if you could, would you? If it didn't have to have the engine out, I probably would.